I think as entrepreneurs and as CEOs and as COOs, we're always giving people more projects and more tasks and noticing 3 more problems with the website. And here's 6 more things we need to improve. And here's how we need to keep growing. Every time we push anybody forward in one way, we need to celebrate 2 things we've just done. So if you're rolling out 3 new goals, you need to find 6 things to celebrate or say thank you for. And I think if you can create systems to praise people for living the core values, to praise people for hitting the core, but like all of that praise and thank yous really builds a strong foundation for growth. It starts with a leadership team discussion where the leadership team needs to actually look in the mirror and realize that they didn't continue to scale, right? The leadership team started to fail. The leadership team didn't have plans in place to grow people. The leadership team didn't have personal improvement plans in place for people. The leadership team didn't forecast the skilled needs of their people 12 months out and 24 months out. I think I was talking to Chris on a group one-on-one coaching call a week or so ago, that if you forecast what your company's org chart looks like in 3 years, in 2 years, and in 12 months, you're going to start to identify gaps in the bench. You're going to identify the people that are working in certain areas of the business don't have the skills they're going to need in 12 months. So the first discussion happens internally at the leadership team level, which is what are we going to do better so that we don't have this happen again? Then it's sitting down with that person and saying, hey, I take some responsibility in this, right? We outgrew you. We should have been growing you more, but we need them to come to us and keep growing. So you need to hire people that are self-driven learners. You need to hire people that are hungry to learn. You want to hire people that would go into the Invest in Your Leaders course and devour all the content right away. That's kind of what you're looking for. But it's sitting down with them and saying, it's not about you. The company's outgrown you. We're going to either try to find a place for you in the company where you're going to get to report to this new person, right? We're going to hire this new senior person and you're going to get to report to them. You won't get to report to me anymore. That's a discussion you can have if they're the right person. Maybe they're just now in the wrong seat. Or you just say, hey, we've given you a good 3 years, or we gave you a good 7 years, or we gave you a good 17 years. Now you're going to get to go and work at another organization for the next chapter of your career. You don't have a responsibility to employ people forever. You have a responsibility to employ them as long as they're productive and they, are living the core values and delivering on the work for the money that we're willing to pay them. As a company scales from 30 to 100 employees, it's a lot less command and control, and it's a lot more of the functional decision-making across different orgs. So what you're looking for is, hey, we have a project that we're putting in place, and maybe it's a new pricing model. Okay, so for that new pricing model, we need someone from ops, probably someone from finance, somebody from marketing, and somebody from sales, and maybe even somebody from the people side of the business to consider how to best roll this out, what the impact's going to be, which different business areas are involved. So what I like to do is every time we're saying yes to a project, whether it's a green or yellow light to a project in the next quarter, it's deciding which business areas are going to have to touch that project for us to either consider it or roll it out or integrate it with the website or the CRM or explain it to customers. If we're touching it from these different perspectives, get those people involved. The second part of it is to use Parkinson's law to control how much time we spend on these projects so you don't get massive project creep with, so many meetings and subgroups and working committees and all this that can happen. So give people a lot less time just consider each of the projects so that you don't end up with these cross-functional teams spending months doing something that should have been a 1-hour meeting. How I look at it is for every project, what are the different business areas that are involved, either internally or externally? And I like thinking about what's the impact on people. We were just, Carl's had to jump off early because I know he was only on for part of the initial part of today's call, but we were at an event up in Norway a few weeks ago and somebody said, do you have somebody representing nature or the planet in your decisions, right? When you become a bigger organization, who's sitting down to consider the people implications and who's sitting down to think about the implications that we have on the planet or society with what we're doing too? That's something to consider. But I just like to be careful with getting too many people involved. We as companies need to be able to say no to people attending meetings as easily as it is to invite people to come to meetings. And I think we can sometimes build these real kumbaya group hugs where we're trying to invite everybody because we don't want to hurt their feelings. We need to get more done with less people faster. And sometimes we need to say, you know what, you're not needed in this meeting. The 3 of us can handle or the 6 of us can handle it. And you need a culture where it's okay for people to be uninvited. And it's okay for people to say, hey, I was invited, but I don't think I need to be there. I think you guys can do it without me. And that was something that Steve Jobs was very misunderstood at Apple for being able to do, was he would walk into a meeting, he'd be like, why are you here? And he wasn't doing it in a weird way. He just meant, I don't understand why you need to be here when your time is probably better spent back at your desk working on some other projects versus the 4 people that can actually move this forward really quickly. So be careful with building up these cross-functional teams for the sake of doing it. Take a look at Pat Lencioni's book, Silos, Politics, and Turf Wars. But by starting cross-functional teams, you won't necessarily break down silos. You might end up building in bureaucracy when you're trying to break down silos. Another way to break down silos is every time you have a business meeting, everyone at the meeting has to say thank you or praise another business area for something they did well or a core value they lived. And it's about kind of recognizing the different people's contributions. So it's more of a cultural norm that we need to create. And that's what breaks down silos more than anything else. I think it's really, again, goes back to cultural norms and your core values, and also the way that you run the business. The work hard, play hard culture, or the hyper growth culture, or the, Parkinson's law, we're going to bust through that. But you have to create some urgency inside of the business. If you ever feel like they're just trying to be, we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, that's a big sign, man. Like feelings. And you can actually be very firm, but very fair. And I'll say stuff like feelings, but I also built the number 2 company to work for in all of Canada while saying stuff like that. So you have to have leaders that are really good with pushing faster, are really good at saying no, are really good at uninviting people, because growth and a better business doesn't come from building this like nonprofit kumbaya, everybody is going to be liked, and like that doesn't scale, right? You have to still live the company's core values. You have to respect people. You have to be kind. You have to be considerate. We have to be thoughtful, but that doesn't mean slow, and it doesn't mean over inviting, and it doesn't mean that we can't fire somebody. Like I've seen so many leaders who won't fire somebody because they want to be liked. It's more about being respected than being liked. And I think the more you're respected, the more you'll end up being liked. I have friends from my 1-800-GOT-JUNK days, and I left the company 17 years ago, who I fired, and they would still call me one of their friends, or they would still call me a mentor. They would use me as a personal reference, even though I fired them. And it's because that kind of respected that style of leadership. The 2 of the modules in my Invest in Your Leaders course, and I would have every manager go through it. One is the project management module, and the second is the time management module. And the third is delegation. Those 3 all dovetail in really tightly with each other. But the way that you're going to get the big things into the calendar, the big priorities being done, working on the critical few versus the important many, is by teaching people how to do this, teaching people how to work around that stuff. So what happens often with early stage managers or first or second time managers is they, unbeknownst to themselves, they end up building bureaucracy. They end up making the company slower. They end up getting less done. And it's because they don't know how to say no. It's because they don't know how to prioritize, because they're trying to be respectful of everything, but they forget that we also have a business to run, and you can do both. The best and fastest growing companies on the planet still care about people. At 1-800-GOT-JUNK, I took the company from 2 million to 106 million in revenue in 6 years. We doubled the company's revenue 6 years in a row. But we had this culture of hypergrowth. We had this culture of drive. We had this culture of living the core values. But we also, like, if somebody was sick, well, of course, go. But the culture was like, you got to make sure that it gets done. The work still gets done. If you need time off, go take the time off. But we still have a business to run. So the culture was making sure that the priorities were taken care of. The critical few things were in the agenda and baked in. So that goes back to where I just rate people based on that A, B, or C, right? The A players are the racehorses. And it sounds like when you were playing, you were more the B player. You were the solid workhorse, right? You were never the A player, but you certainly weren't the C. You weren't screwing things up. My worry on a sales team is that you have a salesperson who maybe is at the bottom of the 15 people. Are they burning through leads, right? Are they burning through potential clients? Are they costing you more because they can't sell? And if they're costing, like, they might be ROI positive, but what's the net cost of if somebody else was able to handle those leads? And I saw this back, in my college pro painters days, where we had certain franchisees that could go out and land 65% of every estimate they did, right? You give them 10 estimates, they were landing 6 to 7 clients out of that. I'd have another franchisee and you give them the same 10 clients, they'd land 3 or 4. Now, I liked the person. They weren't massively screwing things up, but the cost was really different. So what I decided to do was, how can I coach those people? What's the minimum that is acceptable? Or how do we make sure that the A players can cover for them? But I would be looking at a little bit of both of those. I don't subscribe to the fire the bottom 10% every month. I've never been that whole Jack Welch fire the bottom 10, or the guys that run the car dealership that we read about that always fire the bottom 10. The reality is they're not doing a good job of hiring the right people in the first place. They're creating more of this farm where you're just, churn and burn, churn and burn, churn and burn. And that's not the culture that I like. But I think if you have a solid stable of A's and B's, and you know that there's one bottom performer, if they're the right cultural person, like they live the core values, they're trying their best, then coach them and work with them. But at some point, if they are costing, if they're ROI positive, but the delta between ROI positive and what the better people could be doing with those same leads is too high, maybe they're in the wrong seat, right? Maybe you don't have to get rid of them from the company, but maybe you can put them into a sales support role, or maybe there's a different role in the organization. Maybe it could be more of a customer support once the clients are with you. This was one of the best things we ever did at College Pro Painters, was we created the weekly results, and it was about 7 or 8 metrics, and we ranked all of the franchisees in every division against each other. And every week we changed which column we sorted by. So week 1, we might be on revenue. Week 2, we might be on profitability. Week 3 might be on customer service. Week 4 was on their closing ratio. So what happens is you don't always end up with the best person, the number one guy, right? Every week it's kind of changing around, but I would absolutely, in a sales environment, make sure that everybody knows everybody's key data points. And then the second part of that is that if they're going to be on my team, you can bet that we're still going to be coaching and training them on a daily, weekly basis, maybe even an hourly basis, right? That if they're not getting the results, you're constantly working with them. But the hard part is if you're spending time with a C player, you should be spending more time with your B's and A's. I would say firing C's is okay, but don't make your B's bottom people unnecessarily. Though is be ruthless with the rating of an A, B, or a C, because I find that if I sit down with a company and they show me their A's and B's, after 3 or 4 questions, I can prove to them they pretty much have B's and C's and they don't have any A's at all. Culturally, this is just like, you need to rip the Band-Aid off. It's just not okay. Or you need to have a very, very, very severe once and once only come to Jesus meeting, where they have to know, if this happens again, and I don't care if you're the CFO, I don't care if it's Lacey, I don't care who it is. If this stuff happens, if there's lying, if there's theft, it's done, it's over, and you leave. I culturally have a massive, massive problem where there's theft or lying or people trying to cheat the system. You're sending a really, 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 really bad signal by not firing those people. If a person is supporting it or condoning it, they're part of the problem. They're creating that culture that it's okay. And I'll tell you, as soon as you fire people for a core values breach that is that strong, then they're actually core values, right? We've heard the saying, like Enron used to have core values. They had them up on their lobby wall, but Enron didn't follow any of the core values. If they're core values, you have to be willing to fire people who break them. That's my number one test for a core value. Are you willing to fire people who break them? Otherwise, they're an aspirational value, which is fine. When you make those tough decisions, as Jim Collins talks about confronting the brutal facts, when you make those tough core values decisions, your company will scale so fast because of it. Because the people that are living the core values, the people that are showing up and making the right decisions, the people that are showing up trying their best, all of a sudden feel like you actually do care about them. But when they know this stuff is happening and you don't do anything about it, they don't feel like we stand for anything at this point. Every year or so, the CEO and COO tend to have to reinvent what their roles are because they're delegating more and growing people. I would have you and the CEO, or you and the CEO and the leadership team, look out 3 years into the future and decide what the company looks like, acts like, and feels like 3 years out. Get that new vivid vision for a company that is much bigger, much broader, better skills, much more profitable. And then I would start reverse engineering that. That's one thing I would look at. The second thing I would look to how do you actually automate and optimize the business so that you can actually scale the business without adding people, right? How can you actually now grow? Because often our growth is adding people, adding people, adding people. Now what you want to do is be able to grow with automations, I was talking to a client the other day and they went from 220 employees, they doubled the size of the company and they went down to 170 people. So imagine going from 220 to 170 and you doubled revenue. But it's because they focused on optimization and automation. And I think if you could start focusing on that, a lot of gross margin drops to the bottom line, right? Can you start looking for tech people to come in and actually value stream map the entire business? Can you look for tech people that can come in and automate parts of the business? Can you look to, and not in a Machiavellian way where you're replacing the wrong people, but can you look for growth without adding people? I would start spending time on that. And that brings an awful lot of value to the company. Starting to look at your business through the lens of all these other companies to find out what are they spending their time on. And you're going to, I call it ideas having sex. You'll take an idea from Lacey's business, an idea from Kevin's business, an idea from Jeff's business, and those ideas will have this little idea baby. And that's what you'll bring into your business. I think we often think that we're supposed to be busy doing the work. And what we need to be busy doing is seeing it from a completely different perspective or a different lens. If you can see your business through other people's perspectives, that's where your role is going to get identified for you. Well, the idea of the vivid vision is a push and a pull, right? When the CEO crafts one, people think we're idiots for rolling out the vivid vision the first time. Like when you rolled yours out a few years ago, people thought you were crazy. And then over time, you get to indoctrinate them a little bit. They see it a little bit, they hear about it a little bit more. They're rereading it for the fourth time over 6 months. They start getting indoctrinated and they start to see the value in it. So you're going to create a bit of a pull mechanism where your leadership team needs to have the new vivid vision for the next 3 years, maybe co-created from you and the new CEO, or the CEO is creating it, you're just giving some advice, but the team's going to need to have clarity of vision like they used to have from you. And if the CEO comes in without that, there's going to be a massive gap, right? The team doesn't operate without one. Second part is just to kind of sell them, don't tell them. So give them your vision statement stocks TEDx talk. It's 18 minutes. Have them watch that video. And just even that alone will show them the value of it. Give them your current vivid vision and let them know, hey, we wrote this 3 years ago. This is really what came true over the last 3 years. Imagine if everybody in the company could see what you're going to start to see as you're the CEO of this roll up, right? So that they can start to see the combined, vision of what you're building. So there's a bit of a pull part, and then there's a bit of a sell them, don't tell them part, I think. Because what you're doing is describing the entire company 3 years in the future. You're describing sales, marketing, IT, finance, customer integration. You're talking about what your employees are feeling, what the media is writing about your leadership team, the dashboards. It depends on how much they've already pulled out of their mind, and then how many meetings they need to have with this person to get more information to fill in the blanks. But over the course of a couple of months, it's also how fast they can respond. Like I did a book in probably 20 hours of my time because I was able to dedicate the time and I showed up present and I answered their questions and I had all my information ready to give over. And I've had other people that took, 12 months to write their book because they couldn't, it was a month and a half between meetings. But I'll do another call in 2 days, right? If we can speed up the time, just do all the work faster. The first is kind of the State of the Union, right? It's the classic US president State of the Union address, but do it in a way better way. And the State of the Union is supposed to be, here's what we said we were going to do last year, right? Here were all of our goals for the year or for the quarter or for the 6 months. And here's how we did against each of those metrics. And then here's what our plan is for the next 6 months or a year. Does anybody have any questions about that? And what I tend to do is I do that twice a year, where every 6 months, you have a State of the Union address where you talk about our plan for the last 6 months and how you did against plan, how you did against your metrics, what your plan is for the next 6 month period. And I tend to have each business area do a bit of a 5 or a 7 minute update and give them the template. Marketing will show their plan for the 6 months and how they did and where they missed and what their metrics were and what they're doing in the next 6 months. Sales will do theirs, ops will do theirs, customers. So you can have each business area follow that same 5 to 7 minute update wrapped by the CEO at the end. And I think that State of the Union address can be very, very powerful. So that's meeting format one. The second one is more of the town hall, and you can do those on alternate 6 month periods. So maybe you're doing State of the Union in January and July, And then a town hall meeting you're going to do in April and October. And the town hall meeting is you going to all the employees and just saying, what are you seeing? How are we doing? Where are we letting you down? What are you noticing? And let them ask the leadership team questions. And I like doing it with like some appetizers and drinks, and everybody sits down and you're sitting up on maybe chairs up at the front of the room or stools at the front of the room, and they're asking questions and you're answering. And that format is really helpful because it allows them to see that you're open and you'll take questions and you're engaged. And then the third format is the skip level meeting. And this is the meeting where, let's say you have a head of marketing, Nick, that reports to you. You might go and meet with everybody in marketing, but the head of marketing is not allowed to come. Or you might go and meet with the entire finance team, but the head of finance is not allowed to be there. Or you go meet with all the salespeople without the VP of sales present. And that's a skill to run a skip level meeting where you're asking questions and listening, and you're talking to them about your ideas and getting their feedback, but you don't super engage with the feedback or the comments that you're getting. So when they say something, you just say, thank you, that's interesting. Or thanks, I appreciate you sharing that. It's not, oh my God, we're going to change that. Oh my God, I love what you said. Yes, we have to do that. Because you've only got one side of the story. So it's kind of like if one of your kids comes to you and goes, Daddy, Bobby's being a dick. You don't go scold Bobby until you hear Bobby's side of the story and you realize Bobby actually didn't do anything wrong. Bobby was merely responding to the way that, Sammy was treating Bobby. So you need to get both sides of the story, but the skip level meeting is the third style that the CEOs need to spend time in. Most CEOs don't spend time on this because they're so busy in the business. They're so busy in the weeds. They don't see the value. The employees want to know they're a part of something. They want to feel included. They want to know that we're listening. One of the big things you can do from your employee net promoter score survey, which again, you do twice a year, is when you're hearing from them on a scale of 1 to 10, how enthusiastically would you recommend this as a place to work, right? You calculate and you get your percentage of promoters, subtract your percentage of detractors. You're on your second question, you're just going to say, what's one thing we can do to make this a better company? And you're going to take all of the most common responses and start putting those things in place. Now, if 5 of your employees say they want more of an open door policy, but the other 95 don't mention it, when you say, hey, we're doing this open door policy, 5 people will feel good about it. But if you roll it out and say, hey, we were listening, and in the last Net Promoter Score survey, a bunch of you said you wanted an open door policy, so here's what we're doing about it, every employee will feel like you're listening to them, even if only 5 people mentioned it. It's the art of rolling it out in a way that said, we listened to everybody, and some of what people asked for was this, so we're doing it, makes everybody in the company feel like leadership is listening to them. Until the CEO become more of the CEO and you have that kind of passing of the baton, I think it's important that employees know that they're following the leader, right? It's follow the leader. Everyone wants to follow the leader. And if you're still the leader in their minds, they don't understand why you're absent from vision and why you're absent from the town hall and why you're like disconnected and why you don't care. Just be very cognizant of some of those feelings that I think we're still children trapped in adult bodies. And I was a part of an organization years ago coaching the leadership team, and the father, Roger, had built a company to about 100 million in revenue, and he was passing the baton to Sebastian, his son. And I was there at the leadership team meeting where the baton happened, and Sebastian rolled out his vivid vision for the next 3 years. And at the end of it, he said, this is the vision that I have for the organization. If you're as excited about this as I am, it's time to build it. And then his father stood up and said, and I'm going to be moving aside to let Sebastian roll this out. And everybody was like, whoa, but they were so bought in, they realized the baton was passed. People really want clarity. It's like the roles, goals, and responsibilities. Like as much as org charts aren't loved, I like doing an org chart and flipping it upside down where the CEO is at the bottom, supporting the VPs, supporting the managers, supporting the customers. Like it's more of a supportive, like an inverted pyramid. But people need to know who does what and who reports to who, and they need to know. Yeah, you need the vivid vision for each company completely separately, period, end of sentence. Nobody who's working for the house painting company gives a shit what's happening to the junk removal business or the moving company. Like they only care about the house painting company, right? So don't confuse it for them with these other businesses. You might have three vivid visions for three separate companies, and the shared services might be a part of all of them. And they might see how they're tied together, but they only should be focusing on the one vivid vision. And then what's the plan to make that vivid vision come true and who's doing what? You might also have some people that work for three or four different businesses across some shared services, but they just need clarity around the vivid vision for what we're building with X. First is I asked the business area themselves to come up with the all-inclusive list of all the metrics that they feel that their business area should be accountable for to ensure that our company is going to hit the goals that we're hitting. Don't you set the goals for them, get them to come up with the first all-inclusive list. That's the starting point for each business area. The second part is, what are the top 2 or 3 metrics for each business area that should roll up to the leadership team dashboard? Like marketing, if they're measuring 25 things, you don't need to see all 25 of their metrics on a weekly, monthly, even a quarterly basis. What you need to see is the top 2 or top 3 from marketing. And if at any time those metrics are yellow or red, right? Like they're red, yellow, or green. Red means something's really wrong. Yellow is there's an indication there might be a problem. Green is everything's good. If anybody's metrics are red or yellow, you're going to dive in and talk to them. If they have 2 or 3 metrics, like let's say all 3 metrics for marketing are all red or yellow, then you're going to sit down with marketing and you might go through all 25 metrics with them. But you don't want to have all of the metrics from marketing and all of them from finance and all of them from ops and all from IT, because then you've got 250 metrics in front of you, which means you're really not looking at anything. The third part of this is once you know your leadership team's dashboard or even business areas dashboards, how often are you going to look at each of the individual metrics? And then what are you going to do if they're outside of the band of acceptability? So what's the lower threshold for that metric and what's the upper threshold for each metric? Even profit can have like a too much profit, right? If we have too much profit, we should be hiring people and putting into marketing. I don't want to give 30% to the government. So there's a number. And if it's too low, what are we going to do? So set the goal for each metric, the bottom and upper threshold for each metric, and then decide what triggers them as to green, yellow, or red. And then how often do you look at them? And then lastly, make sure that there's one person assigned to each of the metrics. You can never have more than one person assigned to any metric. If you've got 2 or 3 people assigned to a specific metric, it means no one's accountable. Somebody needs to be single point accountable for each metric. I don't think I've ever found a CEO or a COO who spends enough time saying thank you or showing gratitude or praising people on the team for living the core values or celebrating the successes of the metrics that we're hitting or celebrating the successes of projects that have already just gotten done. And there's that old saying of 2 strokes for 1 poke, or the sandwich, that you praise people twice as often as you give somebody criticism or stuff to work on. I think as entrepreneurs and as CEOs and as COOs, we're always giving people more projects and more tasks and noticing 3 more problems with the website. And here's 6 more things we need to improve. And here's how we need to keep growing. Every time we push anybody forward in one way, we need to celebrate 2 things we've just done. So if you're rolling out 3 new goals, you need to find 6 things to celebrate or say thank you for. And I think if you can create systems to praise people for living the core values, to praise people for hitting the core, like all of that praise and thank yous really builds a strong foundation for growth. And I think you need to put those systems in place to do that. It's like being in a normal relationship, right? The only way you can ever get through the fights and the arguments and the stress of a normal relationship is because of all the deposits you've put in and showing gratitude and showing love and caring for the other person. If you only told your partner or your spouse once a quarter that you love them, the next argument or fight destroys you. But if it's constantly you're showing that stuff, it does help you get through the tough times. And I think we feel like our employees know that we care about them, but we need to show them a lot more than we do.